Hello and welcome to another District 211 automotive technology video. My name is Mr. Tulo from Conant High School, and today we're going to talk about the different construction types of vehicle bodies. Most car body panels start out the same, from large rolls of steel that are cut into sections and then stamped by huge machines with thousands of pounds of force into a specific shape. These panels are for various shapes and sizes and are either welded or assembled on the car, but this is where the similarities of cars end. There are two main types of structures for modern automobiles. One is a full-frame vehicle or a body-on-frame vehicle where the frame and the body are separate, and the other is a unibody construction where the frame and the body are one whole piece. Unibody vehicles are lighter and stronger, which makes them more cost-effective to build and results in better fuel mileage. There is also a huge added benefit for safety because in front and behind the passenger compartments there's what's called crumple zones. These are built-in weak points where the car will actually deform and crunch or crumple in the event of an accident, so the car will absorb the impact rather than the passengers absorbing the impact. Cars were originally designed with the frame over body design because we just did not have the technology to create efficient unibody vehicles like we have today. And there's also the added benefit of strength. This is why you see them in heavy duty trucks and pickup trucks today still, because you just can't beat the torsional strength of a full frame vehicle. The downside of that strength is safety. There's no crumple zones on a full frame vehicle. If you get in an accident, that frame is going to be rigid and stay rigid during that accident and not really protect the passengers. This is something I'm not going to touch on very much, but it could be the future of the automotive unibody world. This is actually a McLaren monocoque that's made out of carbon fiber, and the front and rear subframes kind of just bolt in, the body panels bolt on. It's still a form of unibody, but they are actually talking about producing this for other car manufacturers like Honda and stuff like that because it's so much stronger and lighter than the steel unibodies they're currently making. Let's take a look at an actual unibody car now. So when you look under here, I'm sure it's pretty intimidating, and this is kind of a goofy example because this is a custom-built car. But right off the bat, I noticed the absence of a frame. Now, that's not to say that there's not frame rails. You can see like a frame rail type of structure here, but if you look, it's reinforced and welded to the floorboard. And on this side here, the same thing. So it's built into the structure of a car, and that's what defines the unibody. Now, with that being said, there is what we call subframes here. So if you look at the silver part, the shiny aluminum part, that's raw aluminum, that is the front subframe. So there is a section of the car that is kind of a frame that can unbolt. If we look up here, you see we got one. There's a second one right up here. You can barely see. And then there's another one right over here. So there's 3 bolts on each side that hold that subframe in. And if we disconnected the struts, a lot of electrical stuff, and all the hoses and stuff off of the engine, you could literally set the car down and put that subframe on jack stands down here and lift the body off of the engine and transmission. Not every car has one in the rear, but this one does. Again, look for that aluminum structure. You could see where some of my suspension components bolt to. I see my rear differential, the drive shaft, everything a normal rear-wheel drive car will have bolted to that same subframe. So I can see these bolts are covered up because there's a brace to stabilize it, but there's 4 bolts. It's these things that hold the rear subframe in. So just like the front end of the car, that whole rear pocket can kind of drop out. Now, there are similarities between full frame and unibody cars with cross members. So that's what's holding my transmission in. That's called a transmission cross member. It goes across from one end to the other, and that's what's supporting the back of the transmission. So that's a cross member. That's the front subframe. There's the rear subframe. And this is a unibody car because the main structure of the car is welded together. Real quick, let's look at this unibody as well, because it's completely naked. You can see where the floorboard, underneath where you see those two lines, that's where our floorboard meets the firewall, and there's the trans tunnel. The transmission is sitting in there. You can see our shifter sticking up. But that's a completely bare car that we added a roll cage to. So we tied in our own little structure to the existing structure of the car. You can see all of the cross bracing and supports that Chevrolet made to strengthen the car by the rear wheels where the suspension components bolt to. You could see that's the upper shock bolt right there. So everywhere they needed to, they reinforced it and made it strong. There's where the rear seats mount to. This is where you would sit if we did have passenger seats and stuff like that. But this is what it looks like without all of the interior stuff on it. It's just stamped steel, spot welded together. That's how these things are made. They stamp the steel into panels. The workers lay it over the next piece. It fits perfect, and then they spot weld it. And in areas where they didn't spot weld, they use seam sealer. And we spent a decent amount of time scraping seam sealer off of this thing, but you can see that's the seam sealer right there. So it's actually, you know, pretty much airtight, pretty much watertight when you're driving around. This is our example of a full frame vehicle. So this is my 2010 Dodge Ram. You can see that's the transfer case. So I'm kind of in the middle of the truck. I'm behind the engine. There's the front wheels. You can see there actually is a frame rail here. There's a ladder style frame. It goes all the way to the front, to the back, literally from bumper to bumper. Okay, and what I'm focusing on right now is one of the body bolts. So that's where the cab actually mounts to the frame. You can unbolt the bed and the cab. The cab is the passenger compartment on a truck. You could actually unbolt the bed and take it off and leave the cab on, or you could take the cab off and leave the bed on, or take both off. So we literally can undo that bolt. Obviously, again, there's a lot of electronics and hoses and stuff that need to be disconnected, but if we take those bolts out and lifted up the body, we could literally just leave behind an engine, transmission, you know, driveline, just sitting in the frame.